Hello and welcome everybody to episode 26 of the Get Out of Your Comfort Zone series. Um, I am so excited to be here today because today marks the first time that we're actually going to embark on a two-part series because our guest who's coming up, I believe, has so much wealth to share with our audience that I think it would only do it justice to have it broken up into two parts. So today's episode and then the next upcoming episode will focus on Alexis as part of enriching your lives um, with the hope that her story inspires you all to make the decision to step out of your comfort zone. And with that, I would like to bring on Alexis.
Hey,
Hello.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Hey,
How's it going?
it's going good. It's going good. I'll admit I was quite nervous when you asked me to do
Uh,
this podcast. I don't like being kind of the focus being on me or the attention on me and everything. But like you said, it's about getting out of your comfort zone, trying new things, even if you're afraid.
yeah, and as per the title, which is quite apt, you know, painfully shy, though you're not as shy and letting your shyness stop you, but it speaks to the truth of how you feel, and I really appreciate you sort of pushing past that to do this thing, which I think is very important. So with that, how about we start with you telling us the story of how you and I met.
Oh goodness, it's been I think almost exactly a year now around this time. But I was on a road trip. I was in LA working on a film project at the time. Me and a friend work on film projects together. And I was very stressed out at the time. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to take like a weekend road trip when we didn't have to shoot that weekend. And I'm going to go up to San Francisco. I've been to San Francisco several times, both for work and also I have several friends up there in that area. So I decided, okay, I am going to drive to San Francisco. And I've never taken the PCH before, so let me take, the Pacific Coast Highway. So I didn't really have a plan about where I was going to sleep because it's the longer way when you take the PCH instead of taking the I-5. I think it's 5 hours or something to take the I-5. But I decided to pull over because I kept stopping and taking pictures on the PCH and stopping and like, ooh, looking at all the sites. And it started getting late. And I was thinking to myself, there is no way I'm going to drive on this road at night with how winding these roads are. So I just decided to pull over on one of those pullouts that you see along that road. And I was just going to sleep there that night, right in my car. And you happened to be there. There was another couple of other cars there. People were just checking out the scenery. So I was settling down, getting ready to go to sleep. And I was observing you in your car because I kept thinking stranger danger. I'm driving by myself. And we basically met on the freaking side of the road of the Pacific Coast Highway. You approached me first, I believe, because I was getting out and taking pictures of the horizon and everything. And we just started talking and everything, getting to know each other. I got a chance to meet Titus, I think. Titus. So, yeah, yeah, there it is. We took a picture together. That was the following morning. So that's how we met. And I got back in my car and headed on the road towards San Francisco. I had a nice couple of days seeing a couple of friends and hanging out with them just to decompress before I had to head back to LA. And yeah, that's how we met.
Yeah, so um this is such a great picture, and like I had completely forgotten about this moment, until, we were sort of preparing for the show and you mentioned it, and it just brought me so much joy to sort of realize that we were actually able to capture our moment together, and Titus even made it to. Uh,
Titus made it in the photo. He's so soft. I still remember how soft he was. Very, very comforting.
yeah, well, road tripping can be a hard journey, and you just need something soft to just,
I
make you feel
know. Yeah, yeah. And I remember that was the following morning, like I said, when we took that picture before we went our separate ways. But I was very nervous at the time. I remember you approached me, we were talking and sharing each other's stories. And still, I was nervous, because again, when I'm by myself, like I've traveled a lot by myself. And I always have, I always try my best to have situational awareness and follow my gut instinct. Everyone says follow your gut instinct all the time. But sometimes it can be hard to tell if that's my instinct speaking to me or if that's just, anxieties and trauma or fears that are, interfering with my decision making or overwhelming me and everything. But when I travel, especially when I'm doing things by myself, I become much more aware of my gut instincts and what it's telling me and everything. So I remember being very nervous, but I didn't have this, I guess you can say, instinct to just leave. I've done that before where I didn't feel comfortable at all in a situation meeting new people, so I would just leave.
like.
And I was nervous meeting you, but I was thinking, you know what? I have a good sense. I don't feel threatened. I don't feel like I need to leave. Let me just get to know this guy. And I remember you busted out the drums or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't have no rhythm. And you asked me to like drum with you and make music. And I'm like, just doing this rhythmic thing. I have no rhythm. So I'm like, okay, let me do the drums here. I'm so freaked out a little bit because I'm like, I feel like he's gonna find out just how much bad rhythm I have when it comes to music. And I'm like, please don't ask me to sing. Please don't ask me to sing. It was an
Oh my
experience. It was unforgettable. While we watched
god.
the sunset
Well,
over the Pacific Ocean.
yeah, it was quite the magical evening. Thank you for sort of bringing back those memories in such a strong, beautiful way. So with that, why don't, if it's okay with you, why don't I give our audience an introduction
Mhm.
of you? So, um, Alexis is such a beautiful anomaly. Um, she has a soft presence with such a bold personality, having pushed herself to experience and grow in ways few women have done. And I say this to bring attention to the social conditioning women have to endure that really propagates fear in a way that is debilitating to independent self exploration and waking up more deeply to the queen that resides within each and every single woman. And Alexis is a living testament of how much she has transcended and continues to do so. Um, Alexis was adopted when she was merely a few weeks old and grew up in an environment where she had to grapple with less than ideal relationship dynamics as well as sexual molestation. She grew up in an environment where she encountered bullying from for numerous reasons, including looking like she was Pocahontas. And all of this, along with her natural propensity forced her to retreat deep into herself and be painfully shy, as the title suggests. She started to blossom in some big ways in college, one of the chief reasons being multiple study abroad excursions in Italy, France, and the Middle East. And then finally, she chased after her lifelong dream of working in Hollywood and did what it took to scrap a living and grow as an artist. And in my book, that represents a success. Alexis made it. More recently, as a result of COVID, because she also works a remote corporate job, she was inspired to start driving around the country and live out of her car for months at a time. And last but not least, one of the most important aspects that I hope to make the focal point of today and the upcoming episode is painting a picture of how Alexis started to recognize the importance and the power of her intuition, her gut instinct, and how she basically, trained it in a way to rely on it. And as she was mentioning earlier, even though she met a hairy, bearded male as the sun was going down in the middle of a highway, by a cliffside, how, you know, this, our interaction is a testament of how, despite the voices of fear in her head and, all of the things she navigated as a result of training her instinct, her gut instinct, to be able to permit herself to participate in that experience in a way that enriched both of our lives, which, had she not done, would not allow us to be here in this present moment and capture this magic that will live long after both of us are gone. And that it's such a powerful testament to that hopes to inspire others. So, with that, is there anything that I missed out in the introduction, Alexis?
No, you did not. I loved it.
all right. So, with that, Alexis, let's dive deep. Let's dive deep into it.
Yeah.
Um, can you tell us the story? Paint us a picture um, of finding out at the dinner table that you were adopted.
Oh wow. So it's a uh it's a long story with so many different plot twists and turns. Some of the close friends I've discussed in detail with it before said, "Wow, you should write a book one day about that stuff." But so I, like you mentioned, I was just a few weeks old, maybe a few days old. There's still a lot of unanswered questions around my origins that I'm still trying to discover and everything. But with my adoptive parents, my mom and dad, they're the only parents that I've ever known. My mom died 5 years ago. My dad, he's still kicking at 91, still healthy, still insists on working, still being stubborn. But I was very close to my adoptive mom. Am very close to my adoptive dad. And so when I was about 12 or 13, I believe, there were some family conflict going on at the time, and my parents were going through a separation. And that's when I discovered through my mom that that she wasn't my biological mother. It just kind of slipped out of her mouth in a moment of anger. And so I remember being 13 and just I felt like someone had hit me with a bucket of ice water. It's like just new. I couldn't process the news that just was handed to me. Like, you're not my real mother, then who is? That was the first question I had.
Yeah.
But I guess because, it was a moment of, it just slipped out that the adults try to, clean up the mess and say, oh, no, 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 like, it's okay. You're still loved. Uh, you know, this person isn't your biological mother. This person is your biological mother, but your dad, he's still your dad. There was just this kind of like, let's try to keep this still as much as we can, save the secret as much as possible, I guess. But so at 13, I learned who my biological mother was. And so I think for me at that age, and for a long time, I'm the type of person where when something traumatic happens in my life, I just immediately think to myself, I'm going to push this aside and not deal with it right now. I don't want to deal with it right now. And that's something that I unintentionally picked up from both of my parents, my adoptive parents, because they were born during the Great Depression. They both came from very difficult, impoverished backgrounds. My mom was born and raised in Texas. My dad was born and raised in South Carolina. Um, and I know that my mom was almost 80 when she passed away 5 years ago. My dad, like I said, is 91. So they've experienced a lot of trauma with poverty, with domestic abuse, childhood abuse. And so they also, just to survive, had a way of just shutting down also, like not dealing with the elephant in the room, basically, or the multiple elephants in the room. They just try to carry on and ignore it, which I can understand maybe during that time is a way to survive, to keep going.
Yeah.
And people don't realize you can teach kids whatever you want, but they're going to model how you behave. They're going to pick up stuff that you may not consciously realize that you're doing or saying. The kids are going to pick it up. So I developed, I guess, I picked up some of that stuff too from them. Like something traumatic happens, don't talk about it. So I didn't talk to them about being bullied. I didn't talk to them about being sexually molested. I just didn't feel like it was something that, I guess, I just had to hide it, basically. So when I found out at 13 who my biological mother was, again, that was another situation. Like, I'm not going to talk about it. And something in my gut told me I wasn't still not being told the full truth, but I didn't want to deal with it, like I said.
Yeah.
But then around, I think it was 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I'm already an adult by that point. Is another situation, a family conflict situation, where it was slipped out that my dad wasn't my biological dad either. And it was said in a cruel way by this other person. They said it to hurt me, but it just basically what it did was it just affirmed what I already knew, but I was unwilling to acknowledge it even to myself at the time.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, now it's out. I have to process it. I have to accept that. And it was the second time I kind of went through an identity crisis, because the first time as a kid, kids process things differently. And for me, it was upsetting initially, but then I kind of thought to myself, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. But as an adult, when I was told, oh, by the way, this is the name of your biological father, it hit me really hard. And there was a time period for 2 or 3 months I went into this deep, deep depression. It felt like I fell in a black hole. I felt like I was completely betrayed by everyone in my family, my adoptive family, who it was like everyone knew but me. They all basically tried to casually or intentionally hide the full truth from me. That's how it came across to me. So I felt really betrayed. And I was just in this deep pit of depression for several months, like questioning, like, who can I trust? And also beating myself up, like, I'm really stupid and I'm really naive to think that I could just not acknowledge, something that I knew deep inside already, basically. And I was lucky because at the time I was going to therapy. At that time, I had already been going to therapy consistently for other issues, dealing with my childhood trauma, sexual molestation stuff. So when I found out that piece of news, and I fell into that deep pit of depression, my therapist held my hand throughout the whole thing. And I
Mm.
really don't know what I would have done if I had not been consistently going to therapy at the time. And she helped me to process it and deal with the emotions, the really negative emotions I had around that time period. Because I remember at one point thinking to myself, I remember as a kid, I'd watch, Unsolved Mysteries, right?
Mhm.
Or the news about people who disappear or something, or like adults who would just completely disappear out of the family's life. And their family thinks they've been kidnapped or murdered, but then 20,
Mhm.
30 years later, you find out like, oh, they just, disappeared and didn't want to deal with the family anymore. They just ran away and created a new identity.
Yeah.
There was a point during those months after finding out the news that I thought to myself, I kind of understand why people do that. They just completely run away, make a new life, make a new identity because they don't want to deal with the stuff in the past. Those thoughts crossed my mind at one point. I had suicidal thoughts cross my mind at one point as well. I remember when I was 14 also, I had suicide ideation a lot. I attempted suicide when I was 14. I didn't go all the way through with it. But yeah, that's as an adoptee, a lot of people talk about how, oh, you should, feel so lucky that you've been adopted, or you have adoptive family that adopted you and loves you, which two things can be true at once. You could have a situation where you have very loving relationship with your adoptive family, with your parents. You can have a great childhood, that doesn't have the stuff that I dealt with, but adoptees still deal with trauma because of different, you deal with feelings of abandonment, you deal with feelings of rejection, and a lot of adoptees deal with trauma. Some of them had to go through the foster system,
Mhm.
which I didn't. It was a private adoption. I was not in the foster system, but a lot of adoptees had been at some point. So it's really invalidating and dismissive when people who don't know, they either haven't adopted themselves or they've never been adopted. It's really invalidating and dismissive, even if they meant well,
Yeah.
when they say stuff like that. Oh, you should count yourself lucky. Or, you should feel so lucky to have been adopted and find a loving home and find your forever home. I've heard people say that before and everything. So, but that's just a rundown, like a breakdown of what I experienced with the identity crises that I had, feeling like, still having a very loving relationship with my adoptive parents, but, having complicated feelings around, you know, not being told to begin with about my origin stories.
Yeah. And I think, thank you so much for saying that, because, you know, um we want to, like, I think, you are very sort of um, passionate about painting a balanced picture,
Mm,
and like showcasing the love that you have for your adopted parents, but then also bringing attention to sort of the darkness that you grappled with, like
yeah.
the fact that you asked me to share some of these pictures, and so tell us about this picture.
That's a picture. I think it was about two, that or almost two, but that's a picture of me and my mom. We
Uh-huh.
were in the living room, and it's a cropped picture. That it's us on the couch with two of my older cousins. Um, and but one thing is what I love about this picture is for a long time I didn't really question about before I found out from her that she wasn't my biological mother. Everyone always said, even to this day, that we looked alike. Like, oh, you have your mother's nose. Oh, you have her complexion. You have
Mm-hmm.
her hair. And like, I'm of Mexican American descent. She was of Mexican American descent also.
Mm.
And so I had the same curly black hair, same skin tone, and not the exact same nose, but close enough. And so it's just growing up, it was like just a complete shock. Like I said, like a bucket of ice water being suddenly thrown in your face, finding out, wait, you're you're not my mom, but we look alike. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And this is the
this,
three of you
yeah,
all.
this is the three of us. I don't know how old I was in that picture, probably 2 or 3 or 4. I don't know. But that's my mom, that's my dad. They were childhood friends. They'd known each other. They first met like back in the 1950s. Like I said, my dad's 91. If my mom was still alive, she would be 85 now.
Mm,
She was 45. She'd already raised 3 daughters of her own by the time I was born, and then I came along at 45. And when they found out that uh, basically it was a situation where a young woman, was pregnant and everything, and she didn't have the means to raise a child and all this stuff, and her situation was a little crazy from what little I understand. So, and
mm,
she was trying to find someone that was be willing to adopt once I was born.
mm.
Or she was possibly I would have gone into the foster system as soon as I was born. So my mom and dad, found out through family friends who, mutual friends. And so they said, we would love the opportunity. And my dad always wanted children of his own. He never had that opportunity.
Mm.
So my mom was 45, my dad was 51 when I came into their lives.
Wow. So you were your daddy's dream come true.
Yes, at 51 years old.
Wow. And last but not least,
This was
there
actually
you are.
taken, yeah, back just a few months ago, right before I hopped in my car to drive cross country again. And I
Mm,
was gone for about 3 months. Me and dad have this tradition where anytime when I'm about to leave on a trip, whether flying or driving or whatever, or as soon as I come back and back home, we take a picture together and all
mm.
this stuff. So this was right before I hit the road heading to California last spring.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. As we move on, the title explicitly suggests, how painfully shy you were slash still are a little bit. Um, so tell us the story. Paint us a picture of your background of, you know, being painfully shy, your earliest memories, and then that sort of character trait being reinforced as a result of being bullied and picked on for looking different, like Pocahontas.
Oh my gosh. I remember one of my earliest memories. I was in a store with my mom, and I was the kind of kid where if you so much as looked at me, I would just want to die and run away and hide. Right?
Mm,
I wasn't the social kid. Like, my parents could sit me down on the floor with my toys, and I could play with myself for hours by myself. And I remember being in a store with my mom, and one of the ladies, the cashiers, um, she looked at me, and I remember my face turning bright red, and I was thinking to myself, why is she looking at me? And I remember like hiding behind my mom a little bit, and I made the cashier laugh. She thought it was really cute. And she looked at my mom, and I remember her saying, oh my God, your little girl just turned bright red as a tomato just now. She is so adorable. But I was just super embarrassed. I was super embarrassed, scared to death, and thinking, oh my God, am I really red as a tomato? Like, now everyone's going to look at me. I was just so awkward and shy.
mm,
And then, I went, majority of my schooling years, I went to a private Christian school,
mm,
even though my parents were not like, my parents sent me to a private religious school because they thought at the time it was better than the public school system that of South Carolina I was going to, which it
mm,
probably was. South Carolina, I hate to say it, has always ranked at the bottom of public education, even since I was a kid. Like they got up to, I think they ranked 44 out of 50 states. Their public education system went up to 44, and I'm like, that's a win. Not really. And at that particular school, it was a very small private school, and again, it was a situation where I was just very socially awkward. And I learned to be a people pleaser. Like the teachers give you attention if you, with a lot of girls, they learn how to be people pleasers because, you know, they're kind of knocked down a lot. You know, don't do this, don't do that. Little girls don't do this. Little girls don't do that. They're told constantly what they can't do. And if you do this, you'll be a good little girl. Or in this case, the Christian school, if you do this, God will be happy for you. You're not going to be sent to hell and burn forever in hell. That was kind of the indoctrination we got at that school. So, and I remember when I was 6, the principal, who was also a pastor, told us that The Simpsons was the Satan show and that we would go to hell if we watched a show like Simpsons. And I burst into tears when I got home and told my dad that we were both going to go to hell. And he said, why? And I said, because we watched The Simpsons. And they said we're going to go to hell because that's the devil show. So my dad has sit me down and explained to me that The Simpsons was fine. Like, you're not going to go to hell for watching that show. But sorry, I get sidetracked like that.
No,
but at that school, all throughout, you know, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, I really struggled to. It's a situation where, and it's shocking to me when I think about it, but not really. Small private religious school, there's so much bullying that happens. Like you either were bullied or you participated in the bullying to avoid being bullied yourself. And I remember like the 1st grade or 2nd grade or something, like there'd be gangs of kids that would gang up. You know, one kid would be chosen as the punching bag for that day, and everything was, you know, destroyed about them, like their looks, their height, their hair, how well they played on the playground, how well they understood math problems in class and everything. I got picked on a lot because one thing about growing up, being Mexican American descent and growing up in Charleston, South Carolina, is I was practically for years and years the only brown kid. So I got confused a lot for being mixed, biracial, black and white. And so I got picked on a lot, especially when that Disney movie Pocahontas came out. And it didn't help either that like it's not like PC now, but when we were, you know, around Thanksgiving, they would make us dress up as pilgrims and Indians, right? For like the Thanksgiving week. And I always, at one point, they kept choosing me to be one of the Indians, right? And so the parents had to make costumes for us. And my mom, she was very good at sewing. She had her own sewing machine. I mean, my mom was amazing with her hands and crafting stuff. And my mom, you know, like I said, was Mexican American heritage. Her family, they traced their family back to like 1600s Spain and Mexico. And they had indigenous heritage in them too, which she was very proud of. So she would buy material and create beautiful, she made like small moccasins for me. I still have them, very small handmade moccasins. And she made beautiful, I guess you could say like clothing, Native American style, generic Native American style. And she would, you know, dress me up like that for Thanksgiving, for the school events where we would do programs in Indians. Yeah. So that, you know, I still have some of those costumes that she made, you know, for sentimental reasons.
Of course.
You know, my mom made them by hand and she was just so talented at that stuff. But, you know, wearing that stuff and going to school and being the only brown kid, it was just the kids almost naturally picked on me about it. And then when the Disney movie came out, I was called Pocahontas all the time, to the point, and they would pull my hair and say, why don't you wear your hair in braids? Or if I did wear braids to school, they would start jerking them. Silly stuff like that. I remember one time one girl told me, like, well, you know, Pocahontas isn't really beautiful at all. She's really actually ugly. So, you know, she just wanted to find a way to tear me down. Um, but dealing with all that kind of bullying and everything, and like I said, everyone got bullied at some point, some more than others. I remember there was this one girl, she was very much like the punching bag a lot. She was picked on a lot
Mm,
compared to me. So all of that, and you know, trying to play games and all this stuff, people would pick on your ability and skills. So I just became very withdrawn, very, very, very withdrawn. And I felt like if I say anything, or if I try to be too friendly, or if I try to play a ball game really hard,
mm,
I'm going to be picked on. So let me just withdraw. Let me not try. Let me just, you know, be docile and quiet. Because if I
mm,
stay quiet, if I stay small, really small as possible, I won't be a target. And I really internalized that a lot,
mm,
unfortunately. And that was carried with me for years and years and years. Like, be small, be as small as possible so that I won't be targeted.
mm. Wow, that's so profound. And um, I I think it's really important um, that you've sort of taken us to such a deep understanding of how psychologically you were just so trained by your whole environment
Mm-hmm.
to uh, essentially feel like a nobody and
Yeah.
and then be invisible. But then you had a turning point in high school. Um, so tell us a story about being called the Mexican princess.
Oh my God. So I think it was beginning of my junior year. Most of my friends that I did have at the private school had already transferred to public school, because parents who were paying tuition at this place were starting to realize that this school was not, you know, providing good quality education, more providing indoctrination. I can't say the word, but religious brainwashing, basically. And I finally, I don't know, I can't remember the exact details, but I remember telling my dad one day, Dad, I need you to take me to the community college, because they're telling me that I have to take exams because they don't have qualified math teachers. So I have to take math classes at the community college to fulfill my requirements to graduate high school.
Mm,
And my dad was like, what do you mean they don't have math teachers? He's like, what am I paying tuition for at this place? And so that was the first conversation where I had with my dad, where I just explained to him, yeah, this is, you know, this is what we actually do at school, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I fell behind with math, you know, because they don't have actually accredited math teachers and everything. And I started explaining a little bit more, because I never, like I said, I never talked to my parents about any of the bad stuff, whether happening
yeah.
at home, this bad stuff happening inside me, my emotions, the bad stuff happening to me. I just didn't talk to them about it. I kept it all in. And so for my dad, I started telling him about the lack of qualified teachers at the school. And
Yeah.
so he got upset, of course, and he just immediately pulled me out and put me in a public school.
Yeah.
And this was a new public school that had opened up in my district and everything. And it was actually a really good public school. So I spent the last 2 years there. And I remember I remember the first day I was there, I had transferred like 3, 4 weeks into the semester had already started. So I was
Mm,
literally the new kid in the middle of the school year showing up, or almost in the middle of the school year. The first day, I was so scared that I was going to get my ass beaten up by students, because I had this idea in my head that public school is bad. Public school is where the kids are going to like beat you to death or shoot you to death or something. So I was like shaking in my shoes as I got my class schedule, and I had to go to each class and introduce myself to the teacher who would introduce me to the class. And so but I freaking loved being there after a few weeks. I loved school. I never had a problem with school. I loved learning. I loved reading. I loved, all the classes. And I felt for once that I was actually learning stuff
Mm,
in my classes. I took, my math classes that had teachers that actually knew what the hell they were talking about, and they would try to get me to understand,
mm,
the math problems. And there was no bullying. I remember that. Like,
mm,
I, it was such a big school compared to the small private school I went to. I did see bullying happening, of course. I mean, it's public school, it's the deep South. Gay kids are going to be targeted, black kids are going to be
mm,
targeted, and everything. But for me, I just kept such a low profile. No one really bothered me.
mm,
And I remember taking some of AP classes with classmen, like with students who were a grade ahead of me. So when I was a junior, I was taking classes like with some of the seniors, and I remember thinking they were so cool. Like, oh my god, they dye their hair purple. They're wearing piercings. This is amazing. Like, it was just, they have tattoos. What? Like, so I was just kind of blown away, and by these older students. And one of them, this girl, she was so cool. And I actually, years later, I realized like I had developed a crush on her and all this stuff.
mm.
And so one day we were walking in the hallways about to go to, different classes, and she looked at me and she's like, "Well, good morning, Mexican princess. How are you today? I'll see you in class later." And I just remember, oh my God, she called me a princess. No one's ever called me a princess. So I was just, oh, but yeah. Um, and some of the other kids, I made friends there. I made friends, like, especially in my drama classes. I was all about drama, in the theater classes.
Mm,
I'm still friends with a girl to this day. She was one of the first students I talked to my first day at the public school. We're friends to this day. We met in one of the theater classes on my first day showing up.
mm,
So that was my first experience being exposed to kids of different backgrounds, not just one, homogenous background. Kids who were Muslim, kids who were Christian, kids who were not religious at all. Kids, I met the emo kids, I met the cliquish kids, the sporty kids, the ROTC,
mm,
I'm going to make a military career kids, all these different kids from different backgrounds, which just was eye opening for me, because I'd spent most of my schooling years, like I said, at this small, private, oppressive school, a religious school.
mm.
And I don't blame my parents for that, because they at the time really thought that they were doing what was best for their child. Let's send her
Yeah.
to a school that we think will provide a better education. They could have done a little bit more research. They didn't, but I don't hold that against them. They thought they were doing what was best for me. But I made some friends the last 2 years of school, and my eyes were, my horizons were broadened a little bit more. In regards to that, we had, the school counselors, the guidance counselors, who would have us do job shadowing stuff. And I said, I want to do something with theater because I like acting. And so I got a chance to shadow some actors at the Dock Street Theater, which is a very famous historical theater in my hometown of Charleston, South Carolina. They've been doing theater. The theater has been there since the 1600s. It's one of the oldest theaters in America. It's very well known. I had a chance to shadow some of the actors the adult actors, as they were rehearsing for a play that they were going to put up that season and everything. And I was just, again, blown away, because the only theater acting that I did at the private religious school all those years was like religious oriented, where, we were trying to send a message to people that they were going to go to hell if they weren't saved. It was all like, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that, or you're going to go to hell. So that was really the only theater experience I had, trying to scare the shit out of other kids to conform or else. So I had a lot of fun. I can honestly say the last 2 years of school, public, with my schooling years, was at that high school, West Ashley High School.
Yeah.
Were some of the best memorable years I had, because I
Mm,
made friends with different people and I came out of my shell a little bit. And then when I hit university, that's when it really changed for me a lot. That opened
Yeah.
way more opportunities for me.
You went buck
I
wild
went
in
back.
university, didn't you? So tell us tell us the story of um this is a good one. So tell us the story of being in Italy and you just like having a meltdown in front of the phone booth
Oh
uh
my
in
gosh.
Italy. And give us
Okay,
some
so
background too, obviously.
well, I ended up after I graduated high school. I my first year I went to Charleston Southern University, which I blatantly I didn't do my research. I just applied for school, any colleges I could, and some of them didn't accept me because I had applied too late, and some of them you said get out of here. You're not going to come to this school, but like but like I ended up the first my dad instilled in me a lot like you gotta get an education, and like the idea of taking a year off or even like 6 months off to work and save money up and try to figure out and what I want to do, that was like no option for my dad. He was of that generation where you got to go to college, you got to go to college no matter what. And so I ended up going to Charleston Southern University, which I blatantly realized was another private religious environment. It's a
Yeah.
Christian university. And, they had things where you could fulfill all your academic requirements, but if you don't go to a certain number of chapel attendance or meetings, they don't give you your degree. You don't graduate. Which they're a religious private school. Those are their rules. That's fine. I'm not gonna go in there and try to tell them how to do their stuff. But I realized, oh my god, I gotta get the hell out of here. So, so I ended up after a year managed to transfer to USC. It's a state university in Columbia, South Carolina, and um, some of the friends I have today are the people I met during my years at USC. And I remember, I think it was my sophomore year, one of my friends, we saw a flyer in the hallways in the humanities building where you could do a summer study abroad. And it never crossed my mind, about traveling abroad. This is the thing, like my parents, because of their background and, not having enough money, the only traveling my dad did was when he was in the army. He was drafted in the army, the Korean War. That's the only traveling he did abroad when he went to war. My mom, she's traveled some to different states. Like she lived in Iowa when she was young and raising her daughters, my older sisters and stuff. But they didn't travel really a lot, other than my mom traveling between Texas and South Carolina. So, my world was small,
Yeah.
and, what was presented to me. And the thought of traveling abroad, I was thinking, oh my God, what would that be like to travel outside the US for a little bit? So me and my friend saw a flyer about studying abroad for 6 weeks for the summer in Spain. And my friend, who I'm still friends with this today, was like, yeah, let's go to Spain together. I'm like, yeah, that's such a good idea. But then I ended up seeing another flyer saying to study abroad in Italy instead. And I was not taking any Italian classes. I was actually I got my minor in Spanish. So ideally, I should have gone to Spain, for the semester to brush up on my Spanish. But I ended up going to Italy instead for 6 weeks. I actually had to take out like a loan, use some of my school loan money to afford that. And I spent 6 weeks in Italy, but it was my first time traveling abroad. I was scared to death. And I think it was the first day we arrived. We were setting up in our dorms in Urbino. That's where we were staying, the University of Urbino, for 6 weeks. And there was a phone booth there, and I'm like, okay, let me call my parents and let them know that I made it safely. And I couldn't get the fucking thing to work. I'm phone booths and all this stuff. Like, how the hell do I call abroad? And I suddenly just burst into tears right in front of the phone booth because I'm like, oh my God, I can't get a hold of my parents. Like, I don't know why. I was just it's so silly when looking in hindsight. Like, I'm sure anybody walking by me was thinking, what the hell is wrong with this girl? But I just started crying my eyes out, thinking, I can't get a hold of my dad. I can't get a hold of my mom. Like, what am I going to do? it was just, that sheltered kid coming out of me, feeling like I'm helpless and I can't do anything. And what the hell am I going to do now, without my parents and all this stuff? Because I was afraid, like I said, to leave my parents' side. I was so insular, and my world was so insular. So I don't know why. It's weird. I think about it. What made me decide I'm going to study abroad? Just do it. Like, still to this day, sometimes I think, like, what made me decide to do that ultimately? Because it's like, based on everything else around my personality at that time, being insular, being shy, being afraid to be far away from home and what's familiar,
Hmm.
that was not a decision I would have normally have made at that time. But I made it, and being abroad was probably, I mean, I encourage everybody. I remember my economics teacher in high school, my junior year, my econ 101 teacher. I remember her telling us one day randomly in class, and she was dead serious when she said it too. If you have the opportunity to travel, do it. Do it now. Don't wait. And that's all she said. She didn't like elaborate. She didn't go into detail or, have us ask questions about it. She just randomly said to us one day, if you have the opportunity to travel, do it and don't wait. Do it now. So I think about what she said to this day. Maybe, I don't know, it's just conjecturing on my part. Maybe that little voice was in my head when I
Yeah.
saw those flyers in college, have a chance to study abroad. Who knows? So, but I say the same thing to this day. If you have the opportunity, and traveling is a privilege, it really is. I mean, people like my parents couldn't afford it. Or, they just lived in this insular world environment where they maybe wanted to travel, but they couldn't because of financial reasons, because of family reasons, or because, that they just didn't think they were capable of doing it.
Yeah.
It could be a number of reasons. So traveling, if the opportunity is there and you do have the opportunity to do it, the only thing that's holding you back at that point, if the other circumstances are not in the way, is your own fear in your own, like, view of yourself, of what you're capable of doing. So, but yeah, I basically just cried like a little baby. I was 20, okay, I was still a baby. But I just cried like a freaking baby in front of this phone booth in the hallway of an Italian
So
university,
cute.
thinking that I'd never be able to get in touch with my parents again. It was so dramatic. So dramatic.
Oh,
It was
well,
I was a little dramatic.
um, I'm sure you were a beautiful mess. So I think,
Thank you. That's a beautiful description.
so I think it'd be really valuable for you to share, because I think it's a really important turning point in your sort of blossoming as an explorer, of the time when you were in Venice staying in Sorrento, and how, I guess until that point, just used to exploring as a group, uh, or even, sort of the story in the Vatican. One of those stories, or maybe both, if you want to try to fit them in, but basically to help us understand how you began. And I think this is
Mhm.
very important. Part of what I really want to get out of this episode is trying to capture how you started to become aware of your instinct,
Mhm.
because as somebody who's grappled with a lot of fear and anxiety, the voices of fear and the conditioned fear in our head can be so loud that we can't even hear the voice of our gut, the voice of our
Mhm.
instinct saying that, look, you know we're surveilling the situation, and it's okay, it's safe. Um and I think ultimately the journey is about learning how to, you know, turn down the volume of the fear that's in your mind. And then part two, start to listen to the voice of your instinct, and then start to tune into your instinct and helping to turn that voice up as you modulate, the voice of fear that's in your head. Um, so I'd love to hear from you, about, uh, you know, uh, Venice and Sorrento, to better understand how you started to do stuff on your own.
Mhm.
And if you wanted, the Vatican, we have a little bit of time. So yeah,
Yeah. So halfway through that trip, it was, a class thing. Like we were always doing stuff as a group with the professors. But when we stopped for 3 days, we were going to spend 3 days in Venice. And part of the group, the group I was with, they gave us a free day to do whatever we wanted. And the two girls I was, during the entire trip, I was basically roommates with, throughout the entire 6 weeks there. They kind of just wanted to chill and relax back at the hotel.
yeah,
And I was thinking, oh man, like, no, I don't want to, like, I want to go back to, because we stayed in Sorrento. I think it was called Sorrento, but the mainland, part of the mainland. And then you take a ferry across to Venice. And I'm like, I don't want to stay at the hotel. I don't want to hang around Sorrento. I want to go back to freaking Venice. And it was a decision where I decided, okay, I know how to get to the ferry. I know how much it costs to pay for the ferry, cross it, and then spend the day there and all this stuff. And so I basically, again, it was a situation where I didn't really think it through. I'm like, I'm going to go by myself. And I told them where I was going to go, because I'm like, I'm going to be going here all day and then I'll be back at this time. And I went by myself, and it was the first time I had ever actually been by myself ever. Like I said, my parents rarely traveled. The only times that my mom really traveled was between Texas and South Carolina, visiting her family in Texas and coming back to South Carolina. And I would always go with her. Not always, but when I did travel, it was with her. And prior to that, like I took a plane by myself for the first time ever at 18 to go spend the holidays with my uncle and aunt in Northern Virginia, where he worked in DC. But that was really the only experience I had traveling by myself. So I spent half a day just roaming around Venice by myself. Again, I think I was, how old was I? Oh God, time's flying. 20. And I just walked, I just meandered around, exploring, trying to, talk with my crappy Italian as much as I could. So there was only one instance where I was in a plaza, that famous plaza. I keep forgetting the name of it. It's a famous plaza in Italy. And this one guy did try talking to me in English, and he was just asking me weird questions and asking me, are you with anyone? And I just straight up, my gut was telling me, that was when my alarms were going off, thinking, I don't think I should tell him anything, period. Even though we were surrounded by crowds of people, in the crowd of people, I still felt unsafe in that moment. So I said, yeah, my group's over here. And I walked up to a small little group of tourists and pretended to be with them and everything. But that was the first time I just kind of, one of my first solo forays by myself. It was like half a day. And that was my first experience that took place in Italy. And I think what you touched on earlier was trying to learn how to listen to your instincts while also acknowledging the fear and anxieties you have. Because those, as I've gotten older and I've seen a lot of people, they tell me like, oh, you're crazy. Like there are people that I know that they tell me that they really admire me because I go out to a restaurant alone and eat by myself alone, and they can never do that. Right. But to me, it's like normal. Like I'm hungry. I'm not going to freaking wait around for a family or friend to show up and go with me to the restaurant. I'm hungry. I'm going to go get something to eat. Even if I have to sit in this freaky fancy restaurant by myself because I'm craving this or I want to eat this. Right. So I think it's important, especially, I was 20. I was so young. And looking back, there are mistakes that I realized I made that I could have used better decision making and everything. But it was decisions like that where I decided, no one else is going to go with me. I really want to do this. I'm going to do it, even though I'm scared shitless. I did it. And to this day, it's such a natural instinct in me to, I'm not going to, the things I want to do in my life, the things I want to see, I I can do those, and I'm comfortable doing them by myself or doing them with other people who want to come along with the ride, right? It's just second nature to me now to do that. Whereas I know people who they still struggle with that. They still struggle with they really want to do this thing or they really really want to accomplish this, but they're it's just these anxieties and these fears are holding them back a lot. It's not necessarily because of finances or because of family obligations. It's just plain fear and anxiety that's holding them back. And it doesn't help too that we have friends and family that project their own fears and anxieties. Um, a lot of times when I do stuff on my own or go do something, I don't confide to friends and family right away because a lot of the times they're going to tell you don't do that or you're crazy, why would you do that, it's not going to work out, or that's dangerous, don't do it. And I don't think they do it out of they're trying to pull you down, but they're scared for you and they're also scared for themselves, because we get these messages all the time from the media, from our families, from our friends, from our schools, and all this stuff that don't do this, don't do that, because you're going to fail, you're going to get hurt, you're going to die. And so when we see people we love want to do this stuff that we have fears about, we oftentimes project that onto them. And so for me, I've been very careful who I share my stories with or my plans with, because there's so much negativity, unintentional negativity. And like I said, I acknowledge that, they care for me. They don't want to see me hurt. They don't want to see me like hurt in any way. I acknowledge that. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm going to do this. Now that I'm older, much more self-aware, much more experienced, I have a plan. I know what I'm going to do. And even if I don't know what I'm going to do, I have learned over time, I will figure it out when something comes up. I have learned to figure shit out on my own. And so what you mentioned, like, I think is so important. Figuring out, is it my gut instincts? Is it my intuition? Is it my experiences and, my desires? Everything I've experienced, are those things guiding me right now? Or is it fears and anxieties, not just mine, but other people's fears and anxieties? Are those things guiding me right now instead?
Yeah. Thank you so much for helping to begin to elucidate and make that more clear for us. And I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to the part 2 of our episode, where we dive deeper into learning more about your journey, how the rest of your travels, through study abroad, becoming
Yeah.
a road warrior, other, stories of you, starting to hone in to your gut instinct and cultivating it and learning to trust it and surrender to it. And I just can't tell you how um, how grateful I am to you for being so generous with your time to share with me and our audience, the magnificence that is you, Alexis.
Oh, thank
So
you.
thank you. Um, Thank you. Before we break for the day, is there any last words, that you would like to sort of part with before we, pick back up with the next episode?
Um, oh goodness, no, I can't think of anything. I'm looking forward to the next episode. Like I mentioned earlier, uh, I have severe stage fright. So, but this episode here has been great. Thank you again for reaching out to me, and giving me this opportunity to share my story. I like hearing other people's stories, so it's hard for me to share mine, but I I appreciate it when people show interest in it.
Hell yeah. And with that, people, I wish you love and light. Till the next episode. Over and out, y'all.